Greetings. In this episode, we're going to chronicle some of the key events of the Great Crusade prior to the treachery on Istvaan III. The galaxy-spanning civil war, later known as the Horus Heresy, devastated the Imperium. In many ways, it began with the War Master being wounded by the Anethani blade on Davin. However, seeds were planted long before that with the formation of the Imperium and the Great Crusade. How did the Great Crusade commence, and what key events occurred on the run up to the betrayal at Istvaan III? Many millennia ago, humanity ventured into the stars and created a great stellar empire in an era referred to as the Golden Age of Humanity. To summon the Imperium, it is known as the Dark Age of Technology because of the dangers it unleashed. This period of great technological advancement and discovery ended in cataclysm, with humanity's empire falling prey to its own sciences, causing catastrophes on a galactic scale as well as brutal wars. Humanity descended into madness as they fought over the remaining resources, unleashed horrific weapons of immense destruction, and tore themselves apart for an age. The remnants of humanity's empire became isolated from each other, and almost all slipped into a new age of ignorance and savagery. It was in this era that Xenos raiders and all manner of foes butchered, ravaged, or annihilated the systems and worlds cut off from aid. Even Terra, humanity's homeworld, became a harsh wasteland with bastions of barbaric warlords slaughtering each other over the scraps of civilization that remained. It was during this time that the Martian forges dispatched Exodus fleets, which would go on to found forge worlds across the galaxy. The origins of the being that would come to be known as the Emperor are clouded in mystery, and the truth will likely never be known. He is a being of a man's age with incredible powers and a mastery of science and strategy that are coupled with a gift of foresight and the strength of will to claim the galaxy. It is during this period of Old Night that he would rise and conquer Terra using genetically enhanced soldiers referred to as Thunder Warriors in the Wars of Unification. These soldiers were not fully ready and so suffered from degradation and other issues. They were bolstered by hosts of mortal soldiers. As part of his wider plan to reunite the disparate elements of humanity with its homeworld, bringing them together into a single force, he needed suitable warriors. The Thunder Warriors were not those soldiers. According to official records, they disappeared from all records in the closing years of the Unification Wars. Long before this, the Emperor had turned his genetic arts to the creation of the Primarchs, his generals, and the Legions Astartes, their post-human armies. The pods containing the gestating Primarchs were lost, sent across the galaxy by unknown forces. However, the genetic material was retained. As the final battles on Terra were being fought, the Emperor's forces reached out to claim Luna for the genetic expertise of the Selenard gene cults, who were all but wiped out, with the survivors held by the Emperor. The Treaty of Olympus Mons saw Mars ally with Terra, which joined the might of the Mechanicum to humanity's birth world. This agreement seemed to be a partnership. However, in reality, Mars became a protectorate of the Imperium. Further efforts saw the Space Marine Proto-Legions and other elements dispatched to every corner of the Sol system, reclaiming everything from the Jovian shipyards to the distant servitor stations in the Kuiper Belt. These were some of the bloodiest conquests, with brutal warfare on Venus and in the artificial moons of Neptune. With the resources of the Sol system bent to his will, the Emperor could begin his great crusade in earnest. The Space Marines were dispatched at the head of the expeditionary fleets, semi-autonomous battle groups with hosts of battered Terran forces, Mechanicum assets, and what fleets could be spared. These would grow as the Imperium does, swelling their ranks with each new conquest. Some of the closest systems had not been entirely cut off, and so the fleets ventured to these known locations first. From there, they followed ancient maps and charts, as well as the information sent back by scouts and rogue traders who quested on ahead of the main forces. These could be anything from scraps dredged up from the depths of terrorist vaults to apocryphal tales and rumors of long-lost colonies. Where the disparate elements of humanity were uncovered, diplomatic efforts were extended to offer them a place in the growing imperium. Those who accepted were brought into the fold, becoming subsidiary states of the imperium, its subject retaining some measure of self-governance so long as they provided resources and manpower to Terra. Even this process wasn't done with any kindness. Ultimately, it was the fastest and most efficient way to claim the galaxy and realize the Emperor's ambitions. Those who didn't accept were shown the full force of the Emperor's wrath made manifest. The Space Marines were the spear tip of the fleets and were at the forefront of military compliances, deploying with a force that few could match and none could withstand. However, this early in the Great Crusade, they were too few in number to prosecute whole campaigns. As such, they were supported by the regiments of the Imperial Army. This would occur through a combination of influence, loyalty, and brutal tactics that saw the galaxy burn. Horus, despite his elevation and rank, felt slighted by the Emperor, departing from the Great Crusade as if abandoning his sons. Horus had done unspeakable things for his father, burned worlds, annihilated civilizations, all for the Emperor's dream. The realization that he does not value the Primarchs, their victories and sacrifices, and they are but a means to an end. After 2 centuries of warfare, the Emperor was abandoning his sons, and in time he believed that he would discard them and the legions. One of the events that saw the Primarchs fractured was the Council of Naka. This meeting was formed to decide the fate of the psychic Space Marines within the legions. A test of the librarians had been conducted using information from the Dark Angels, Thousand Sons and Blood Angels legions, amongst others, to create an official formation and test the feasibility of these warriors. Despite the passionate efforts of those in favor of the Liberius, the Emperor decreed that they be disbanded and that none of the Legions Astartes utilized the powers of the mind. Whilst a blow to many of the legions, they were seen by some as the censure of Magnus the Red and the Thousand Sons in particular. In retrospect, these events were possibly even manipulated by Horus to drive a wedge between the Primarchs. The Great Crusade continued, though there was a noticeable slowing of progress. This was until Horus led an assault against the rebel governor Eugen Temba upon the moon of Davin. Whilst dueling with the corrupted governor, Horus was wounded with a blade. This was the anathema weapon crafted by the Kinabrak. This blade was a tool of the dark gods and was capable of killing a being as powerful as a Primarch. In a desperate bid to save their lord, the sons of Horus heeded the advice of Erebus, first chaplain of the word bearers. Horus's mortally wounded body was taken into the Serpent Lodge on Davin, and dark rituals were enacted. Horus was saved. A pact with the dark gods of the warp was forged, and the Primarch emerged altered. The warped deities had twisted and corrupted Horus, possibly enhancing the darkness that already existed within him. Unknown to the others, Erebus and the word bearers, including their Primarch Laugar, had pledged allegiance to the dark gods, and now sought to spread that faith and lay low the Emperor, their only true threat. Magnus the Red, the Primarch of the Thousand Sons, used his incredible psychic might to contact the Emperor and alert him to the threat of the War Master, which he had discovered through his sorceries. In doing so, Magnus pierced the psychic protections and wards around the Emperor's work, the defenses that held back the warp around the secret Webway project. This allowed the demons of the Umerium to descend upon the project, requiring the Legio Custodes, Sisters of Silence, and Titans of the Ordo Sinister, as well as vast servitor forces from the Mechanicum to hold back the tide of the warped monstrosities. The Emperor subsequently ordered Lyman Rus to bring Magnus back to Terra to explain his actions and stand trial for the devastation he wrought. However, en route to Prospero, the Wolf King and his censure host encountered representatives of Horus who manipulated the Primarch of the Space Wolves into devastating Magnus and his legion. When the host arrived, they tore through the Thousand Sons Legion, their psychic might nullified by the presence of the Sisters of Silence. Silence. The events that would become known as the Burning of Prospero culminated in Rus breaking Magnus's back over his knee. The Crimson King and his remaining forces escaped into the war, now embittered against the Emperor. The War Master had been planning for years, even before the events on Davin, carefully ensuring the loyalty of those brothers he could trust to play their part, or be manipulated into doing so, and that his influence was firmly anchored in the hearts of many imperial commanders, admirals, and governors, as well as within the Mechanicum. He knew a number of his brothers would never turn against their father, and so must be betrayed until their deaths to allow the traitors the best chance to take Terra. To this end, he dispatched Sanguinius and the Blood Angels to the Cygnus system far in the galactic east. There they would face a horrific foe, the likes of which they had never encountered before. The Dark Angels and their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, were sent to the distant edges of the Imperium, and Guilliman's Ultramarines were to assemble at Calf to embark on a campaign in the eastern fringes, whilst Jagatai Khan and the White Scars were still considered possible allies by the War Master, not having committed themselves to a side. They found themselves delayed in the Kondak system by an unknown force. Gelbor Hull, the Fabricator General of Mars, declared the Mechanicum's secession from the Imperium and launched a surprise assault against his enemies on the Red Planet, who remained loyal to Terra, the so-called death of innocence. In response, elements of the Imperial Fists supported by the Solar Auxilia deployed to Mars. But when they came to understand the scale of the conflict, they retreated with what materiel they could, including supplies of newly created Mark VI power armor. Horus's betrayal would be uncovered just before the events on Mars. News of Istvaan III was brought to Terra by Nathaniel Garrow of the Death Guard Legion. On Istvaan III, elements of the Sons of Horus, Emperors, Children, World Eaters, and Death Guard legions were purged of their loyalist elements. Survivors would eventually make their way to Terra, bringing further information to the War Master's treachery, and the galaxy would be forever darkened by conflict on a scale not seen since the harrowing days of Old Night.